Has she arrived as a mail-order bride with a child no one wanted? The cowboy chose them both. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the weathered saloon, and Clara Whitmore stepped down into the dust of Crow's Ridge with her daughter's hand gripped tight in hers. No one came forward to greet them. Just stares, cold and curious, from men lounging outside the mercantile, from a woman sweeping her porch across the street, from a group of children who stopped their game to point at the little girl clinging to Clara's skirts. Emma was 4 years old, small for her age, with a birthmark that spread across the left side of her face like spilled wine. Clara had learned long ago not to flinch when people stared, but Emma hadn't. The child buried her face against her mother's hip, and Clara's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Whitmore," a man's voice, low and uncertain. She turned. He stood a few feet away, hat in his hands, dust on his boots, and the kind of stillness that came from spending more time with horses than people. Tall, lean, with a weathered face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so guarded. His eyes were dark, almost black in the afternoon sun, and they flicked from Clara to Emma and back again. "Mr. Callahan," she said. "It wasn't a question." He nodded once. "Rafe." He shifted his weight, glanced at Emma again. "Didn't know you were bringing." "My daughter," Clara said, her voice sharp as a whip crack. "I mentioned her in my letters." "You mentioned a child." His voice was careful. "Didn't mention." Her face, Clara's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "Would that have changed your mind?" Rafe Callahan looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he crouched down, slow and easy, until he was at Emma's level. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother's skirts. "Hello, Emma," he said quietly. "My name's Rafe. I've got a dog named Buckshot who's been awful lonely. You think you might want to meet him?" Emma didn't answer, but her eyes, pale blue like her mother's, went wide with interest. "He's got floppy ears," Rafe continued, "and he's terrible at catching rabbits. Worst hunting dog in the territory, if I'm being honest." The corner of Emma's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Rafe stood, settled his hat back on his head, and looked at Clara. "Wagons around back. It's a half-hour ride to the ranch. We should get moving before dark." Clara exhaled slowly. She'd expected rejection, had braced for it, had a backup plan forming in her mind even as the stagecoach rolled into town. She'd expected him to tell her there'd been a mistake, that he couldn't take on a woman with a marked child, that she should get back on the next coach east. She hadn't expected this quiet acceptance. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The ride to the Callahan ranch was mostly silent. Emma sat between them on the wagon bench, her small body pressed against Clara's side. The land stretched out in all directions, brown grass, distant mesas, sky so big it made Clara's chest ache. She'd grown up in St. Louis, where buildings blocked out the horizon and people lived on top of each other. This emptiness terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Rafe's ranch was modest, a 2-room cabin, a barn that needed repair, a corral with 4 horses and a scatter of chickens. But it was clean, well kept, the kind of place that spoke of a man who took pride in what little he had. "It's not much," Rafe said as he helped Clara down from the wagon. His hand was calloused, warm through her glove. "But it's paid for, no debts." "It's more than I had," Clara said honestly. Inside, the cabin smelled like wood smoke and coffee. A pot-bellied stove sat in one corner, a rough-hewn table and chairs in another. The bed was in the back room, separated by a curtain. Clean blankets, a washstand, a trunk at the foot of the bed. Rafe set Clara's bag down by the trunk. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said, until you're comfortable." Clara's cheeks warmed. They were married, or would be as soon as they could get to a preacher. But he was giving her space, time. She hadn't expected that either. "There's beans and salt pork in the larder," he continued, not meeting her eyes. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage breakfast if you need to rest." "I can cook," Clara said. "It's no trouble." Emma had found Buckshot, a lazy hound with graying fur and soulful eyes, and was sitting on the floor beside him, one small hand buried in his fur. The dog's tail thumped against the floorboards. "She likes him," Rafe observed. She likes anything with 4 legs more than anything with 2, Clara said, then winced at how bitter that sounded. Rafe's eyes found hers. Can't say I blame her, people can be cruel. Yes, Clara said quietly, they can. The first week was an adjustment. Clara learned the rhythms of ranch life, cooking over a wood stove, hauling water from the well, mending clothes by lamplight. Emma followed Buckshot around like a shadow, slowly coming out of her shell. And Rafe was a puzzle. He worked from sunup to sundown fixing fences, tending the horses, doing the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. He was patient with Emma, showing her how to collect eggs, letting her sit on his lap while he repaired tack, answering her questions with the same seriousness he'd give an adult. But with Clara, he was careful, polite, distant. They hadn't been to see the preacher yet. Every time Clara brought it up, Rafe found an excuse: too much work, weather looked bad, needed to fix the barn roof first. You're having second thoughts, Clara said one night after Emma was asleep. They were sitting at the table, Rafe mending a bridle by lamplight, Clara darning socks. His hands stilled. About what? About this, about us, about Emma. No, the word came fast, certain. He looked up at her, those dark eyes steady. I'm not. Then why won't you marry me? Rafe set down the bridle, rubbed a hand over his face. Because I don't want you to feel trapped, he said finally. You came all this way, and maybe this isn't what you expected. Maybe I'm not what you expected. I figure you should have time to be sure before we make it legal. Clara stared at him. I'm already here. I already made my choice. But did you choose me, or did you choose not starving in St. Louis? His voice was rough. There's a difference. The truth of it hit her like a fist. She had chosen not starving. She'd chosen a roof over Emma's head and food in her belly. She'd answered Rafe's advertisement because she was desperate, not because she'd wanted him specifically. You're right, she said quietly. I didn't choose you, I chose survival. Rafe nodded, like he'd expected that answer, started to reach for the bridle again. But I'm choosing you now, Clara continued, and his hands froze. I'm choosing the man who got down on his knees to talk to my daughter, who sleeps in a barn so I'll feel safe, who fixes broken things and doesn't complain when supper's burnt. If that's not enough, if you need me to love you right this minute, then I can't give you that, but I can promise I'll try. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Rafe stood, grabbed his hat. I'll hitch the wagon, he said. We'll go see the preacher tomorrow. The trouble started 3 weeks after the wedding. They'd gone into Crow's Ridge for supplies, Emma riding on Rafe's shoulders, Clara's hand resting light on his arm. It had felt almost normal, almost like they were a real family. Then they'd passed the church, where a group of women stood gossiping on the steps, and Clara had heard the whispers. Marked child. Devil's touch. Shouldn't be allowed near decent folk. Rafe had tensed beside her, but Clara had pulled him along. She was used to it. Emma was used to it. They'd learned to let the words roll off like rain. But that night, Emma had a nightmare, woke up screaming, sobbing into Clara's shoulder about people with stones and angry faces. It took an hour to calm her down, to convince her she was safe. The next morning, Rafe saddled his horse before dawn. Where are you going? Clara asked from the cabin doorway, Emma still asleep inside. Town. His jaw was set in a way that made Clara nervous. Rafe. Those women at the church, they go to the same mercantile we do, don't they? Yes, but... Then I'm making sure they understand that Emma's my daughter now, that anyone who hurts her answers to me. Clara's throat tightened. You don't have to do that. Yes, Rafe said quietly, I do. He was gone most of the day. When he came back, his knuckles were split and bruised, and there was a cut above his left eye. What happened? Clara demanded, catching his face between her hands. Had a conversation with Frank Miller. Rafe winced as she pressed a wet cloth to the cut. His wife's, one of the church ladies. He took exception to me telling him to keep her mouth shut. You got in a fight. More of a disagreement. He caught her wrist gently. It's handled, Clara. Miller won't bother us again. But the damage was done. By the end of the week, half the town knew Rafe Callahan had thrown a punch over his mail-order bride's devil-marked daughter. Some folks admired him for it, most didn't. The general store started running short on supplies when Clara came to shop. The blacksmith suddenly had a months-long wait for any work Rafe needed done. At church, which Clara had started attending, hopping to find community, the other women turned their backs, gathered their children close when Emma came near. "We should leave," Clara said one night, "go somewhere else, start over." Rafe looked at her like she'd suggested setting fire to the barn. "This is our home. This is a place where people hate my daughter." "Some people," he leaned back in his chair, tired lines around his eyes. "Not all." "Enough." "Clara," he said her name like a prayer, like something precious. "I've been alone a long time, built this place with my own hands, lived here through droughts and hard winters and more loneliness than you can imagine. I didn't advertise for a wife because I wanted company. I did it because this ranch felt empty, like it was waiting for something." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "You and Emma, you fill up that emptiness, and I don't give a damn what the gossips in Crow's Ridge think about it. This is our home, and we're staying." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "You're a stubborn man, Rafe Callahan." "Yes, ma'am," he agreed, the corner of his mouth lifting. "But I'm your stubborn man now, for better or worse." The turning point came in October, during the first cold snap. Clara woke to find Rafe already gone, his side of the bed. They'd been sharing it for 2 weeks now, though nothing had happened beyond sleeping cold. She dressed quickly, went to check on Emma, found her daughter's bed empty. Panic hit her like a lightning strike. "Emma." She ran outside, bare feet on frozen ground, and saw Rafe's figure in the pre-dawn gray. He was down by the corral, and he had Emma with him. They were standing in front of the smallest horse, a dappled mare named Clover, and Rafe was lifting Emma up, setting her carefully in the saddle. "Hold on to the horn," he was saying, his voice low and patient. "Just like I showed you, that's good. You're doing real good, Emma." Clara's heart cracked open watching them. Emma's face, that face people crossed the street to avoid looking at, was lit up with joy, pure, uncomplicated happiness. And Rafe stood beside her, one hand on the horse's neck, watching Emma like she was the most important thing in the world. "She wanted to learn," Rafe said when he noticed Clara approaching. "Hope that's all right." Clara couldn't speak, could only nod. "Mama, look," Emma called, her voice bright. "I'm riding." "I see, baby," Clara's voice came out thick. "You're doing so good." They stayed out there for an hour, Rafe leading Clover in slow circles, while Emma giggled and chatted and forgot, for a little while, that she was different. When they finally came back to the cabin for breakfast, Emma threw her arms around Rafe's neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Rafe hugged her back, his eyes squeezed shut. "Anytime, little bit, anytime you want." That night, after Emma was asleep, Clara found Rafe on the porch. He was sitting on the steps, looking out at the dark expanse of land, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. She sat down beside him, and he lifted the blanket to include her without a word. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "About what?" "When I said I chose survival, that's not what I chose at all." Rafe turned to look at her, his face half-shadowed in the moonlight. "I chose hope," Clara said. "I chose the possibility that somewhere in this hard world there might be a good man, a kind man, the kind of man who'd see my daughter and not turn away." She reached up, touched his face, felt the rasp of stubble under her palm. "I found him," she whispered. "I found you." Rafe's hand came up to cover hers. "Clara." "I love you," she said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff. "I know it's too soon, and maybe you don't feel the same, but I need you to know. I love you, Rafe Callahan, not because you took us in, not because you protect us, but because you're good all the way through, and that's the rarest thing I've ever known." For a long moment, Rafe just stared at her. Then he kissed her, soft at first, then deeper, his hand tangling in her hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I've loved you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach, and looked at me like you'd fight the whole world for that little girl," he said roughly. "Loved you for your strength, your fire, the way you don't back down from anything." He kissed her again, gentler this time. "You and Emma, you're my family now, my whole world, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you both know it." The winter was hard, but they faced it together. When supplies ran low, neighbors, the few who'd stayed friendly, came by with extra flour, canned goods, a haunch of venison. When Emma got sick with a fever, Rafe rode through a snowstorm to fetch the doctor, waited by her bedside for 3 days straight until she recovered. When Clara's hands cracked and bled from the cold and the work, Rafe rubbed salve into them every night, his touch reverent. Spring came slowly, reluctantly, and with it came change. The preacher's wife, a kind woman named Ruth who'd always smiled at Emma, knocked on their door one April morning with a basket of fresh bread and a proposition. "I'm starting a school," she said, "just a small thing in the church basement for the children who live too far out to attend the town school." Clara's heart sank. "Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate the thought, but Emma would be welcome," Ruth interrupted firmly. "Very welcome. I won't have cruelty in my classroom, Mrs. Callahan. Any child who can't treat Emma with kindness can learn their letters somewhere else." Clara felt Rafe's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Think about it," Ruth said gently. "She's a bright little thing, deserves a chance to learn." After she left, Clara turned to Rafe. "What do you think?" "I think Emma's going to grow up one day," he said. "And when she does, she's going to face this world head-on. Might as well start now, with someone like Ruth on her side." So Emma went to school, and she came home with stories about letters and numbers, about the other children who were slowly, hesitantly becoming friends, about how Tommy Miller had tried to call her names and Ruth had made him stand in the corner for an hour, about how Sarah Anderson had shared her lunch. "I told them about buckshot," Emma said one evening, curled up between Clara and Rafe on the porch, "and how Mr. Rafe taught me to ride Clover. Tommy said maybe I could teach him sometime." Rafe met Clara's eyes over Emma's head, and the look that passed between them needed no words. This was what they'd fought for, this small, precious moment of their daughter feeling normal, feeling loved. 2 years passed. The ranch prospered, Rafe's hard work and Clara's careful management paying off in good horses, healthy stock, a slowly growing savings. Emma learned to read, to write her name in careful letters, to help Clara in the garden and Rafe with the horses. Her birthmark didn't fade, but the looks that followed her did. She was just Emma now, Rafe and Clara's girl, part of the fabric of Crow's Ridge. Clara stood on the porch one summer evening, watching Rafe teach Emma to rope a fence post. Her hand rested on the small swell of her belly, 3 months along now, though they hadn't told Emma yet, waiting for the right moment. Rafe looked up, caught her watching, and smiled, that rare, full smile that still made her breath catch. He said something to Emma, then walked over, pulled Clara into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara leaned into him, breathed in the scent of horse and leather and sun-warmed skin that meant home. "About how I came here with nothing," she said. "Just a desperate woman with a marked child and a single bag of belongings, and you gave us everything." "No," Rafe turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You gave me everything, a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in good things again." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I'd choose you again," he said quietly. "Every single time I'd choose you both." Emma's laughter rang out across the yard as she finally managed to rope the post, her small voice calling, "Mama, Mr. Rafe, did you see?" "We saw, baby," Clara called back, her voice thick with tears she didn't bother to hide. Rafe's arm stayed around her waist as they watched their daughter, dance with joy in the golden evening light. And Clara thought about that first day, stepping off the stagecoach into a town full of cold stares and colder hearts. About the man who'd gotten down on his knees to speak to a frightened little girl. About the choice he'd made, the choice they'd both made, to build something real from the ashes of their separate loneliness. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Somewhere, a coyote called to the rising moon, and on the porch of their small ranch, In the wild heart of a territory just learning to be civilized, Clara Callahan stood with her husband's arm around her, their first child laughing in the yard, another growing beneath her heart, and knew without question that she was home. This land had tried to break them, the people had tried to turn them away, but love, stubborn, fierce, unexpected love, had won. And that, Clara thought, as Rafe pressed a kiss to her temple, was the only story that mattered.